We're now going to hear from Helen Conway from her YWCA and WGEA, Workplace Gender Equality Agency perspective. And then I'll be asking a couple of questions to the panellists, and then we'll open to the audience questions as well. So over to you, Helen.
Thanks very much, Susie, and good morning, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. It's wonderful to have so many participants. It shows great interest in what is a very significant issue that needs to be addressed urgently. So in the interest of time and allowing more time for questions, I'll keep my presentation very brief. I'll just talk a bit about the YWCA, and then give you a few perspectives on homelessness and how people, women in particular, end up with financial disadvantage. And then that'll be from my experience as the director of the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. And then building on some comments that Kay made earlier, I'll just talk a little bit about COVID-19 and the impact on women. So the YWCA has a really proud history, 140 years of advocating and working for gender equality for women and young girls. We are, in fact, through our housing arm, the only national women's housing provider in Australia. Now, we provide over 150 nights of affordable accommodation to women through our owned and operated facilities in Victoria, Queensland and the Northern Territory. Now, we believe very strongly that safe, secure and affordable accommodation is a foundation for empowering women to lead a fulfilled life. And that's why we advocate so strongly for this. We provide this sort of accommodation. We have a true belief in the importance of this to women and their mental and physical well-being. And, some people say to us, oh, well, just, it's a capital city issue. This is not a capital city issue. There is homelessness among women everywhere. And in recent times, the Y has released a report on women's housing needs in regional Australia, and there were some rather disturbing findings from that report. I mean, what we found was that 1 in 8 women living in regional Australia had been homeless in the last 5 years, and 1 in 4 had lived in temporary accommodation because they couldn't afford the private rental market. So these are very disturbing findings, and it shows the extent to which homelessness is an issue across our community and across all geographic areas. But it's a big problem, and we can't solve it on our own. And we know that there are many organisations that are prepared to work together, and we believe in this power of partnership. If we can do anything in the next few years, we'd like to partner with people, not just in the private sector, but also with government, so that we can create and increase the supply of social and affordable housing. And I think, as Kay mentioned earlier, it's a big issue, so we need a lot of innovation. We need innovative solutions to address this problem that has been around for a long time, although somewhat hidden, as Kay has mentioned. Now, so, for example, we've partnered with Housing All Australians to put in place a pop-up shelter in Melbourne to provide temporary housing for women. And this is at a property that is slated for redevelopment, but not for some years. So the property is refitted and used as a temporary shelter. So it's things like this that we can together put in place to address what is an increasing problem. There's no doubt that there's a really urgent need for more social and affordable housing, and we need the government to step up. Everybody needs to step up, and what better time to do it? I mean, COVID-19 presents many, many challenges, but it also presents lots of opportunities. Really, if you want to stimulate the housing and the construction sector, what better opportunity is there than to provide a lot more housing that's affordable for people who are facing homelessness? The government to date has put in place a program that really just supports people renovating their homes. Now, all stimulus is welcome, but we think there's a lot more stimulus to the economy that could be provided through the provision of affordable housing and help to relieve the distress that we see so many women facing. So moving on to why women find themselves susceptible to homelessness and my experiences as the director of the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. Look, many women are financially disadvantaged when compared to men. There's no doubt about that. And there are a lot of factors in the workplace that drive this disadvantage. you could speak for hours on this, but look, really, the main factors are these. You've got interrupted paid employment patterns and part-time and casual work that women undertake. And this is primarily due to the fact that women carry the heaviest burden in terms of caring. So unpaid caring responsibilities for children, but also for sick and unwell friends and relatives. You've got the gender pay gap. So the gender pay gap, a persistent problem. It's been in the order of 15 to 19% over the last few decades. We have industrial and occupational segregation. So that means that women are focused and primarily working in jobs and sectors that are lowly paid or less well paid than sectors dominated by men. And then, of course, to top it all off, we have conscious and unconscious bias and plain out discrimination. So as a result of these factors, women have experienced and continue to experience lower lifetime earnings and, of course, lower superannuation balances. Now, when you add to those factors things such as relationship breakdown, domestic violence, you see women being left in extremely disadvantaged financial positions. And this financial disadvantage, as we know, as we've heard, often leads to homelessness. So we really need to work not only at the immediate issue of providing actually more housing stock, but we need also to work to address these structural issues. So gender equality requires quite an integrated approach. You need to incorporate components such as paid parental leave, affordable, accessible, and flexible childcare. You need to remove the financial disincentives from the tax and the welfare systems. And we need to have cultural and structural change. Now, of course, that requires a concerted effort by organisations, governments, and indeed, society at large. But the role of government is actually critical in setting policy positions which can alleviate the impact of the factors that I've referred to. It's really urgent that the government addresses the serious shortfall, obviously, in social and affordable housing stock to alleviate the problem. But more fundamentally, and in some senses more importantly, the governments, whether you're talking about the federal government or state government or indeed local government, need to apply a gender lens to all their policy setting. Without that lens, we see what we see today. We see an unlevel playing field and financial disadvantage for women in so many areas that translates to broad disadvantage, including homelessness. So moving just now finally on to the impact of COVID, just building on some comments that Kay made earlier. And these are very initial observations. We won't know for a long time really what the impact and the real impact on women has been, but there are some disturbing signs right now. And as we know, healthcare workers on the front line are predominantly women. They're in a sector that's not well paid, and they're placing themselves at risk of infection and indeed at risk of death. Now, we've seen in Victoria, for example, most recently, those healthcare workers who have been working around the clock, and as a result, many of them have become unwell. There was a significant number of COVID infections among healthcare workers. We see anecdotally that women are bearing the increased caring and homeschooling responsibilities during the pandemic. And this means that women are stepping back from work. That might mean reducing hours. It may mean not going for promotions. It may mean actually withdrawing from the workforce altogether. There's also clearly been an increase in domestic violence. There are some early reports out from places like the Australian Institute of Criminology, other organisations who are reporting an increase in domestic violence. And we know the extent to which domestic violence is a major contributor to homelessness. And in relation to the early superannuation release scheme, there's some evidence that women are withdrawing a higher proportion of their accounts, and some women indeed are closing their accounts, and more so than men. So this is very early data, but it does cause some concern. So if you aggregate those sorts of factors and you add to it what Kay said about the losing the security of the home during the pandemic, this is a serious disadvantage for women. and many issues that we need to address. So in due course, we'll see what the true impact of COVID-19 will be on women. But I guess my message is overall that, yes, we've got an urgent crisis in homelessness. We need to collaborate across the sector to provide innovative solutions, work in partnership, and work at that level with government to get more housing stock. But we also concurrently need to work on those underlying structural problems that lead to women having less financial resources, some of which then lead to women becoming homeless. Thanks very much.
Helen, thank you very much for explaining the interconnectedness of so many of these issues and why taking a gender lens is so important to developing solutions, as well as singing the praises of partnership